It's the equivalent of a terrorist taking over the library and then negotiating it back to you, and terrorists don't listen very well.
Taking those learning hubs or closing some of those learning hubs is some of the most deprived communities in the county.
Well, how would you feel about someone booting you out of your job and then doing it for nothing? I mean, I'd be surprised if they don't have a picket line outside and call everybody a scab. That's an idea, actually. I might just do that.
We're trying to get them to think again on it, because I think there is a solution to it. And
We're in very strange times we've never worked in before. I never thought I'd be dismantling the library service.
If I was a politician, I'd be embarrassed.
We're saying when you've got to cut £60 million out of your budget, because that's the settlement governments give you, there ain't that much fat on the bone.
You start to do my best in a way. You vote and you just hope for the best.
We didn't think for a moment that we'd be under threat. And of course, on the day that it was announced, it was a shock to us all. People were venting their anger through us, and they insisted that we start a petition, that they would fight to save the library in its current form or as near as damn it, and that the volunteer business was a plan B. And that was followed by a roadshow, where, again, key members of the library service come to each library for an afternoon and put up some stands and try to explain to people. I could see that people were shouting at these poor ladies from the library service and venting their anger in no uncertain terms.
I'm extremely annoyed with the various officials all passing the responsibility on to each other around in an enormous circle back to central government again. I think very few people have thought about the real villains in the piece.
There didn't seem to be an option to keep it the way it was.
There was a piece about that big for other comments. When I filled mine, I filled an A4 sheet and stapled it to it.
Which is going to produce the result they want, because you're only answering their questions. And the questions are framed in their... Well, they want to show that the public accept that there's 2 million quid.
One of the borough councillors, Des O'Brien, came to see me one lunchtime and said that the library wouldn't be saved. He said the whole thing was a charade, and that he'd known that before even the public meeting which he attended.
I looked at the minutes of the meeting and you said something like no opposition members have been consulted on the report. And
that's again another anomaly. But for some reason on the library report, we never got sight of the final report which went to cabinet till a day or two before.
That was strategic by them, so...
It's either strategic or politics. I think the public need to make up their mind on that.
It seemed almost a foregone conclusion that it was going to close or become a voluntary service.
I'm not sure that's right. I mean, there was a consultation, and it would be a pretty foolish, electorally created body that had completely disregarded the wishes of the community that it represented. So I'm not sure that it was a foregone conclusion, but there was some sound evidence behind the list that the County Council prepared in terms of retaining those that were busiest and looking at closure for those that were quieter.
Volunteer, I'd still continue to use it. Obviously, it's still providing a service, but I would feel depressed, I think is the best word for it, because...
Now that is different from the type of volunteering what people have done in the past. We're asking them to do something slightly different. We're asking them to take a responsibility for that library, a responsibility for the property, a responsibility for the stock. Now that changes the ball game of volunteering a little bit.
I think if you're doing it with volunteers, it's like most things. Volunteers are extremely enthusiastic for 6 months. Well, I remember John Beaumont coming in to see, when he came, he said, so straight away, the first thing we do is cut the staff costs because we won't be employing anyone. There's a young mum with a small child, there's another woman who works there who's a single mum. She's got 2 teenage children, she's got a mortgage, she needs a job. And he's standing there saying that he's going to throw these people out of work.
But at the end of the day, I think the Labour Party should embrace community action. You know, that's a much easier, much better way of providing public services if you do it.
Well, he got some sort of post with the village centre. And I've no doubt he runs it very efficiently. You know, it's a good facility. I think he's an ex-councillor of the Labour persuasion, which made it all the more surprising to me that he was telling people that he's going to throw them out to work. You know, people in the village believe he's empire building. I've no idea.
I was on the village centre steering group. I was the county councillor that closed the school. I voted for that. We took it over, and here we are 12 years on. It's a financially self-supporting organisation, and it's working really well.
They've been scared into saying, oh God, we've got to volunteer or we will lose the library. And so they're jolly good people and they will volunteer, and they're a volunteering type.
Like a community centre.
That's right, but it's more club than community in that sense. You're buying into a benefit.
It's about the Conservatives, in the papers, they always say they like privatisation of things.
Absolutely, this is their ideology writ large, really. This is their ideal.
But don't you think if you have a club, like you say, like you do the RSPB, doesn't that make it more private than community?
Well, no, because you're providing a very open community service and you'll be committed to non-discriminatory use of it.
And where will money come from if you want to replace? How do we go about that? Any ideas? No. Neither have I. But,
I think a library performs a very important function within a community, and you know, it's not only a place where people can go and borrow books and music now. I mean, for a lot of people who don't have access to the internet at home, there are computers there that enable them to take part in the information revolution that's taking.
And it used to be good until last July, where computer use was free.
It's not impossible for people in Bulkington to go to either Bedworth or to Nuneaton.
But to get to Bedworth and to get to the Nuneaton from here, it costs time and money. And Coventry, if it was Coventry, well, you can forget it. It really wouldn't be a feasible exercise, to be honest.
We use at least 10 in 3 weeks, and he reads them all. So we would really, really miss it, because I wouldn't go all the way into Nuneaton to get more library books. So we'd miss out on coming to get library books.
I think that's an asset. I really think they need to listen to stories and hold a book.
But if you go to Warwick or Stratford, you'll find that they lose less services over there than we do. And that's because they are Warwick and Stratford. And Leamington, I'll add them in for good measure. But
one young man I was talking to said, the amount of time I use the computer every day in the library, mainly job applications, and he said, and if I were to pay for that, I wouldn't be able to afford it, but 2, it's about 3 times as much as having broadband in my house. So he's got broadband. You don't come in the library at all now.
Yes, on principle. I'm paying more tax, me personally, and a lot of working people. So we don't believe that our services should be eroded. My pay's been eroded over the last umpteen years.
Part of the library staffing is quite a small part of that.
The pimple of the, yes, I probably would agree. It is a pittance, but I don't know. It's not my choice.
Again, it's eroding away what very few jobs are around anyway.
Will you be back, will you?
So.
Well, there is pressure on public services generally, and I'll go back to perhaps my remarks at the outset, which is the general financial state of the country. I think the key thing is to make certain that the police are available when we call, because the majority of people make contact with the police by phone.
I think the government's cutting too far too quick. It's well documented that...
Wasn't it a Conservative campaign slogan for the election that there won't be any cuts for frontline services then?
Well, I don't think there have been any cuts to frontline services. I mean, we're suggesting that the library service wouldn't fall under the definition of a frontline service. There may not be as many buildings, they may not be in the same place, but the critical thing as far as people are concerned with regard to the police service is that when they make a call, the police respond.
Feel secure or something about walking into a police station to report something. It gives that sense of security. It says a lot about taking out some of the fear of crime. So I think...
Well, how would you feel about someone booting you out of your job and then doing it for nothing? I mean, I'd be surprised if they don't have a picket line outside and call everybody a scab. That's an idea, actually. I might just do that.
We're expecting people who we want to make redundant to train the volunteers. Or for some reason they can't volunteer anymore and the libraries have to close. The politicians at Shire Hall can say, not our fault, Gov. It's the community's fault it's closed.
Do you see any parallels, because you said scabs about the coal miners, obviously that brings...
No, not really. and this is a crucial point. The miners' strike was a central government against the miners or the trade unions. This is your own council themselves cutting the libraries. Completely different.
Isn't that led from the central government though?
No. I mean, it's obvious that the country's bankrupt, we're well overspent, and there have got to be cuts. It's a question of how you make those cuts within your own budget.
And we're saying that there's a way to do it. And I'll give you an example of where you can move funds from. Computers are pretty serviceable still after 4 years, but as a capital value, they've got no capital value, so they get written off the books. If we just for 1 year, we didn't replace a computer what was approved, we could save something like about £400,000 or £500,000. That keeps the library service going 1 year in its current forms, or made some other savings, for example, on corporate hospitality. That would keep the library service going. So there's ways and means of doing it. If we didn't subsidise a non-used park and ride in Stratford, that's another £140,000.
What can you do as a politician to help?
Well, as a politician, I can help the people who are putting forward their ideas, put together their business case and put together the case to colleagues of mine on the county council. But as I say, ultimately it's a locally driven decision and in response to local needs. But my job as a Member of Parliament is to represent the wishes of the people who voted me into my job.
Because that's the settlement governments give you. There ain't that much fat on the bone. You start cutting frontline services, what people use on a regular basis. I'm starting to pick up issues which I thought had solved 20 years ago when I first got elected. I thought we'd made progress past that, and the same sort of issues are starting to come around in a big circle.
Hopefully we can show something different out of this library. I'm very optimistic that we can make this library a better one and it will stay open for a long time.
18 libraries will remain open, but they're having their hours reduced by 28%.
So do you see that as democracy failing, or the way you vote?
But when the councils are up for election next, they might find a surprise for them then.
Instead of sort of adding to what the young folk need, we sort of be taking away a bit, I think. I don't know what we can do about it really, apart from say, we can't make people change their mind and we can't put money where there isn't any.
I don't agree with this volunteer business. I think we should. And how much are you saving by this? The salaries, how many people actually work here?